Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Michael Toney, Executive Director of the Urban Health Program here at the University of Illinois at Chicago. You're watching the Urban Health Hotline each week for the last several weeks, and throughout the summer and early fall. You'll have an opportunity to call in and have your questions answered relative to careers in all areas of healthcare, about educational opportunities that are available at UIC, and about some of the important healthcare and educational issues facing our communities. Remember, this is a call-in show. It is your show. Whenever you have a question about the things we're discussing, please call us at the number on the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. We'll do everything that we can to get you on the air so that we'll be able to answer your questions in a timely fashion. In fact, you can call now. The phone lines are open. I'm joined today with Dr. Leonard Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez is the director of the Latin American Recruitment and Educational Service Office here on campus at the University of Illinois at Chicago. But his reason for being here today is that he also serves in a number of different capacities as a part of a group called IALHEA, the Illinois African American Latino Higher Education Alliance, that is also a group that consists of a number of educators and administrators that have formed a very important coalition. Later, we'll be joined by Dr. Valerie Johnson, who is an associate professor of political science at DePaul University, and she's also a member of the IALHEA steering committee. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Ramirez.
Thank you.
First off, I should let our viewing audience know that today's story or show is a bit different from those that we've held in the past relative to focusing on health issues. But as we've mentioned before, the Urban Health Program grew out of community protests. So one of our major concerns and priorities is access for underrepresented groups in the health professions here at UIC, that is African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans. In that regard, IALHEA has a really special mission to assist in that effort, not just for UIC, but for underrepresented students to gain access at colleges and universities throughout the state. Also, it's really important for people to understand that these gains that we've earned here on UIC's campus, as well as at colleges, universities throughout the state, did not come easy. That, as the Urban Health Program grew out of community protests from residents on the south and west sides of Chicago, there's similar stories that can be shared relative to colleges and universities throughout the state. So I just wanted to give you that as by way of background information. And I want to ask Dr. Ramirez, first of all, thank you for joining us today. How did IALHEA first come about?
Well, in the mid-'90s, there was a threat that it was happening at a national level in terms of forces in society, conservative forces, some of them politicians, some of them, from the newspapers, some of them from various areas of society that were sort of rallying against the civil rights gains that had been made in the 1960s. And some of it was known as a contract for America, but it was really a contract against the interests of civil rights and the gains that had been made. And so I think, some African Americans and Latinos got together and said there needs to be some sort of response. We can't just allow this to happen. They were going into courts. They were trying to hit the legislators. They had a public relations, campaign. They had their foundations. They had a lot of their institutes, et cetera. They were all geared and focused to trying to reverse the affirmative action, trying to change the rhetoric of civil rights into something that was really restricting the rights of especially African Americans and Latinos, and also other people who have been marginalized in the system and did not have equal opportunity. And so, people that were particularly concerned about education came together to try to see if we could mount a campaign to counter those kinds of initiatives.
I see. Had there been anything else in existence similar to this before, to your knowledge? Especially within the context of there being a coalition between African Americans and Latinos?
Well, I think that, there was nothing in higher education like we've had today, like IALHEA has. Sort of initiated, but in the past there were sort of glimmers of Black Latino alliances. I think back in the 1960s, with Dr. King's efforts, especially the Poor People's Campaign efforts, on an attempt to integrate many different groups of people, poor whites, marginalized groups, Latinos, etc. There was the beginnings of that kind of rainbow coalition, so to speak. And so, in that respect, I think there were some historical antecedents. However, there was nothing as organized and I think as intentional, and specifically within education as ALHEA.
And of course, we remember the coalition that formed around the election of Mayor Harold Washington,
That was another.
which I think was really a significant occurrence that shows the potential, might, and power of African Americans and Latinos when they form coalitions. I do know that you were intimately involved in the predecessor organization prior to ALHEA, the New Majority Coalition. Can you share a little bit about that and that initiative and what was the sparks behind establishing that coalition?
Well, the mid 90s again was the threat that all of us perceived, and the first step was to try to organize a new majority coalition under the guise that the people who were supporting the Contract for America were actually the elite of the United States, and that most people were really part of a new majority, and that there should be some response of regular people to try to hold on to the gains that they had made and to actually try to advance those gains. And so I think that was the predecessor to ALHEA. And, we called together several conferences, we had held several meetings. And so I think it was an important part of the process because it was through that new majority coalition effort that people began to know one another, understand a little bit about the commonalities that we face, and then try to work out sustainable organization.
Some people might be a bit curious about why it's so important for underrepresented groups in particular to gain access to the academy. We do know that a college degree is a panacea for economic and social mobility for all people, but particularly for blacks and Latinos. When we look at current trends in higher education right now, what are your thoughts relative to campus climates and the numbers that we see now vis-a-vis in past years? Are they higher? Are they better? Are they worse? Or are we just maintaining?
Well, it's sort of a mixed bag because in some sense, there have been some advances. Here at UIC, there have been some advances of Latino numbers, but that hasn't been the case with African American numbers that have fallen precipitously.
Absolutely.
And with the Latino numbers, even though, there is some cause for, some positive, assessment of what's happened in the last few years, there's also cause for concern in that many of the Latino students that are from inner city neighborhood schools are not the people who are getting accessed as they should. They're often students that are coming from other areas that maybe have a better education. And so we want everybody to have that kind of access. And so, we're delighted that all those populations are accessing the university. But what's of concern is who's being left out of the equation. And a lot of those are the neighborhood schools that are not part of the magnet school system or not part of the more elite systems of the public schools.
That brings to mind what one of my comments was earlier in terms of the urban health program and how it really started based upon community protests from dissatisfied residents from the west sides and south sides of Chicago, and how it was through community efforts that really pushed and paved the way for so many people. We've said this numerous times on this show that our program, the Urban Health Program, is one of the best, if not the best program of its kind in the country, where we have graduated just recently over 5,000 African Americans, Latino, and Native American healthcare professionals across the spectrum of health sciences: medicine, dentistry, applied health sciences, pharmacy, public health, and we're very proud of that. But my point is simply that if it weren't for those people in the community to really push to open the doors of opportunities, we would not have had those successes. And now what I hear you're saying is that those people that are in the communities that oftentimes are in close proximity to UIC as well as other colleges, universities throughout the state, and this is just certainly not a U of I issue, because when we talk about access for underrepresented groups, there's over 200 colleges and universities within the state of Illinois, over 4,500 in the United States generally. And so we're talking about access relative to higher education generally, as well as UIC itself. So my question to you is, why aren't more students from the community, from the general public schools, Chicago public schools, not being admitted here at UIC and other institutions? in itself. What's your spin on that?
Well, there's a couple of things I think going on. One of them, of course, is the general economic situation that people find themselves in, and so I think that makes it more difficult. And there needs to be more investment in initiatives to do outreach, not less investment. We're going backwards when we need to be going forwards and building on what we have in the past. I think the other thing is that there is a kind of competition that happens among institutions where they try to recruit, that 1 or 5% of students, maybe 10% of students, and that's, the cherry picking that happens often leaves out many people, many communities. And so, part of our challenge, and I think part of the challenge of the communities, is to ensure that in fact, a broad segment of people have access, and it's not just the people at the top. And so I think, our role is to try to make sure that we sort of always voice the concerns of equity.
Sure, sure. And I know that you also, as director of LARES, have seen some tremendous success stories. When you think of your long tenure with the program and how you've worked with students who perhaps without the support and assistance of LARES could not have gained admissions, and yet despite their may not having high ACT scores, etc., have been proven successful. Would you like to share with the listening audience some success stories?
Oh, well, there's so many of them, but just to come to mind in terms of these are people I've just had some contact with is one of the students who came in through our summer initiative and would not have been admitted to the University of Illinois had there not been some special initiatives to recruit them and to retain them here, would have, he's now doing a PhD in American Studies at the University of Minnesota. There's another student, another graduate student that contacted me that's finishing up his PhD at Arizona State in mathematics, and is doing some special initiative with a local museum here. So I think those are just two of the examples, but there are many, many examples of students who have gone through a process of through these special initiatives and have been quite successful.
I see.